I have two brief questions I'd like to ask, if I may.
Media. My name is Brendan Malone and you're watching The Daily Question. Today's question of the day: which director got mythology right 3 times in a row? And the reason I'm asking this question is because of yesterday's episode, where I explored this whole idea of why is it that Hollywood is now so creatively bankrupt. And it got me thinking, particularly in light of some of the comments I received, about whether it's actually possible still to tell good tales. And I began to ask myself, well, who are the directors, who are the writers, who are the filmmakers who have actually done this? Who are proof positive, living proof that it can actually be done? And there was one director in recent times I'm thinking about who really stuck out to me as an example of a filmmaker who has actually done this in a very original and creative way. And he's managed, with 3 films in a row before he fell off the wagon, to actually ground his movies in really good and interesting stories that explore and grapple with some big issues around the human experience. And that director is none other than M. Night Shyamalan. Now, as I've said, M. Night is a director who has subsequently gone on to fall off the wagon creatively. However, before he did that, this was a filmmaker whose first 4 films in a row were excellent. And the final 3 of those 4 films were what I consider to be like this amazing trinity of mythology. So the first film, the debut film that he has, is The Sixth Sense. This is a film that sort of took the world by storm, the super twist moment. Everyone remembers it's a really well-made film. It has these sort of Hitchcockian elements to it. It was quite different in a lot of ways from a lot of what else was being produced at the time, and it's a great example of filmmaking that puts him on the map. And then the next 3 films, these are the 3 films where 3 times in a row M. Night made films that had good stories, that explored some really profound and important aspects of the human experience. The first of those films was, I actually think, his best film. The best film that he has ever made was Unbreakable. Unbreakable was an unexpected superhero origin story. But not only that, Unbreakable is a film that explores these big questions around masculine identity and what happens to a man when he doesn't understand his calling in the world, when he doesn't understand that unique calling that exists within the gift of our masculine strength to give of ourselves to the world around us. When we are not living a life of self-giving, where we're taking the gift of our masculine strength and directing it outwards. Basically this idea that every man in some way is called to be heroic. They are called to give of themselves, to make self-sacrificial acts in their life on a daily basis, and in doing so they begin to find themselves more fully and live a more full and meaningful life. And that's the sort of central theme of this film. You've got this main character played by Bruce Willis, his life is completely falling to bits. The film starts with him trying to have an affair. He's trying to commit an act of adultery. He's a guy who's not even sleeping in the same room as his wife. The marriage is falling to bits. It's on the sort of the bottom of a downhill slope. He's not relating well to his kid. He's unhappy in his work, and he's trying to run away from his problems. He is looking at taking a job in another part of the country to escape. Effectively, you sort of get that sense that he's trying to find something to fix the problem somewhere else, and we all instinctively know that's not going to fix anything. He's just going to take all of his problems with him. And then he discovers that in actual fact there's a missing piece of the puzzle, that he is actually called to live a self-sacrificial life. And in living that self-sacrificial life, he finds himself, his marriage is healed, his relationship with his son, that dynamic completely changes. There is a sense of happiness and fulfillment and meaning that is returned to his life. His masculinity, his life as a man suddenly begins to make sense. Some really deep and profound issues in a really, really well told tale. And not only that, but the film also, interestingly enough, it touches on this idea of stories being a way of exploring and tapping into these big truths about the human experience. The whole idea that comic books are a form of mythology that explore some of the bigger aspects and important aspects of the human experience. And then comes Signs. And Signs is an alien invasion film which explores one of the biggest and most difficult aspects or questions in the whole human experience. What is the purpose, or what is the point of suffering? What And why are we visited by these senseless and brutal acts of evil and suffering, and how do we make sense of them? And this film uses the trope of an alien invasion to actually explore what happens to a family that is visited by serious grief, and to introduce this idea that even in the midst of the deepest and darkest and most senseless forms of suffering, there is still the possibility of that redemptive hope. There is still that possibility of hope, of light, even in the midst of what can seem like the most brutal and difficult of circumstances. And it's a really profound exploration of a really profound and very difficult question, and this film uses the alien invasion trope to tackle it. It's a plot device to get us into this deep and important question about the human experience. And he does it really, really well in a really engaging and really well told story. And then the last of this trinity of really great mythological tales is The Village. Now, The Village was a film that was panned by a lot of people, and I think there are two big reasons for this. Number one is because The Village was subjected to a marketing campaign that was completely misleading. And a lot of people believed that they were going to see a horror film, or a supernatural horror, a horror thriller of some kind, that was going to focus on who were and what were these creatures that lived in the woods. And that's not what this film is about at all. And basically it's a classic example of why you don't try and dupe people into movie theaters. If you say to people, come and watch this movie and we'll give you $1,000, and it's just a trick, it's a gimmick, you're not going to give them $1,000, and you're trying to get them into the theaters to see a good film, even if the film is the greatest film in the world, they're not even going to remember that. They are going to remember the fact that they were duped, that they were told that they were going to get something that they didn't actually get. And that's exactly what happened in this film. A lot of people, I think, got really angry, and it seems to me consistently that's one of the things I read in reviews at the time, was it wasn't what they thought it was going to be. And really, when you go back and look at that marketing campaign, that's the big reason why, I think. The other thing was the M. Night twist had now become this big thing. What's the twist? What's the twist going to be? Where is it? Where's the twist coming from? And people were so obsessed about looking for the twist that I think in this film it actually undermined the experience a little bit. But when you watch this film, and you go into this film with more of a blank slate, and you're not looking for a horror movie, and you're not obsessed about the twist in the film, all of a sudden you realize that this is a really interesting story, and I think it's a very well told tale about the question of what is authentic love. What does it take to truly love a person? And again, at the heart of this film is this idea of self-sacrifice, that it takes genuine love is not about just infatuation. It's not about feelings or just the sort of the physical attraction that we might feel. Remember, the main character in this film, she's blind, and what she does is motivated by something more than just infatuation, and she is willing to put herself at risk and do this thing that she is so totally ill-equipped and ill-prepared to do out of a total self-sacrificial love for the character played by Joaquin Phoenix. And it's just such a great exploration of this question of what is authentic love and the virtue of love, and why it's so very, very necessary. It's not a perfect film, but it is, I think, a very good film. And then, unfortunately, after that, as I said earlier, M. Night Shyamalan started to fall off the wagon. We had Lady in the Water, which is not an entirely bad film, but it was just so forced. Again, it's trying to explore these big themes around mythology, but it's just an inferior sort of knockoff of what he's done before, and he inserts himself into the film, and things just sort of fall to bits in that regard. Then The Happening was an absolute mess. This is one of the only films that I've ever walked out of where I wanted my money back. I was so annoyed at that film. Everything about it was wrong, and one of the big things was the total miscasting of that film. Zooey Deschanel and Mark Wahlberg, totally wrong for that film. There's no chemistry between them. They are not the right sort of actors, and the way they're directed as well, it feels more like a sort of quirky romantic comedy than what it's supposed to be, which is some sort of apocalyptic paranoia thriller. It just, the film was a mess. Then The Last Airbender. Now, of late, there are signs that possibly we are going to experience the renaissance of M. Night Shyamalan. That would be awesome, because I think he's a really, really great filmmaker. But what his first 4 films, and the final 3 of them in particular, what they prove is that it's possible to actually have good mythology in films, and for a filmmaker to produce really good, well-told movies within that sort of big-budget Hollywood system. each of those films, they're different, they're unique stories, but each of those films, they explore issues of virtue, the stuff that sort of really matters to the human experience. They ask big and important questions. They are films that are fanciful tales. You've got alien invasions, you've got superheroes, you've got a village living in a bygone era, plagued by these supernatural creatures in the woods. Yet all of these tales, despite their sort of fanciful nature, they are all very much grounded in the human experience, these big questions about the human experience. Effectively, they are three fairy tales. And this is what good fairy tales used to do, is they would explore these questions of morality and of the human experience, and they would offer insights, or they would grasp at these insights. And that's what those three films did in a really, really good, and I think not just in a really, really good way, talented and well acted and well made, but they were films that you walked out of the theatre sort of having an experience where you felt that this was just a bit different from your average sort of popcorn movie-going experience. There was something a little bit more going on here that really stayed with you. And as I said, I think for me that sort of the pinnacle of those films was really Unbreakable. It still is his best film, and that's why I'm kind of happy about the fact that we've had Split, and now we've got Glass coming, and I'm sort of hoping this is actually going to be like the redemption of M. Night Shyamalan, because I think based on his earlier career work, he really does deserve his moment of redemption. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts though, so please let me know what you think in the comments section below. And if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please support me on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. There's a link in the description below and a link on screen at the end of this video. That's right, I can hear my theme music too. I'll see you tomorrow on The Daily Question.